On July 11th, 2026, a hairstylist from Owasso, Oklahoma, sat down in front of her phone camera, arranged herself in an empty chair, folded her hands in her lap, and stared directly into the lens. She was mimicking a trend. Millions of people had done the same thing that month, pretending to be interviewed for an imaginary Netflix documentary about their own lives. A joke format built on mock confessions and comedic reveals. Sara Gilson's version was not a joke. 12 days later, she was dead. Shot inside her own home by the man she had spent the better part of a year trying to keep away from her family. He then turned the gun on himself. This is the story of what the court records show, what the people around her tried to do, and what happened anyway. Sara Gilson, known professionally and online as Sarah Duffy, was 43 years old. She lived in Owasso, a suburb just northeast of Tulsa, Oklahoma, home to roughly 20,000 people, and the kind of quiet residential streets where neighbors know each other's names. She worked as a hairstylist. Over time, she built something bigger than a client list, a social media following where she sold clothing and jewelry alongside her hair work, the kind of small business hybrid that has become common for independent stylists trying to build a second income stream. Her platform was modest by influencer standards. It did not need to be large for what happened to her to matter. People who knew Sarah describe her in strikingly consistent terms. Her niece, Colby Manry, said she learned about her aunt's death from a Facebook post and immediately broke down. She described Sarah's client base as a community. Not people who simply sat in her chair for a haircut, but people who considered her a genuine friend and a source of support during difficult periods in their own lives. Lyle Landers, the father of Sarah's 2 teenage children from a previous relationship, wrote publicly that Sarah was the life of the party, a woman who loved her children more than anything, and would, in his words, fight to the death for them. He said his children woke up on a Thursday morning without their mother, and called what happened to her unfathomable. A neighbor, Brittany Fisher, offered a blunter assessment to local reporters in the aftermath. Domestic violence doesn't discriminate. It does not check a person's job, their popularity, or how many protective orders they have already filed. Sarah had filed more than one. To understand what happened in July 2026, it is necessary to go back further, to 2021. Court records confirm that Sarah filed 2 separate protective orders against the man who would later kill her, Jeremiah Sean Duffy, back in 2021. Both were dismissed. Not because a judge ruled against her on the merits, but because she did not appear at the required hearings, a common and often misunderstood outcome in domestic violence cases, where victims frequently withdraw petitions under pressure, fear, financial dependency, or the hope that circumstances have changed. Whatever changed between 2021 and 2026, it did not last. In June of 2026, 2 separate protective order filings arrived in Oklahoma courts within days of each other, and they were connected by the same man. The first came from the mother of a 15-year-old girl. According to that filing, Duffy, a youth basketball coach, was seen kissing and physically touching the teenager, while the two were alone together. The filing states that another coach walked in and witnessed the interaction. The teenager later told her mother this was not an isolated event. She said Duffy had sent her inappropriate messages, invited her to his hotel room during a basketball tournament trip, and given her money that she understood to be intended to keep her silent. A report was made to the Owasso Police Department. As of the most recent reporting, police have not released the current status of that investigation. The second filing came from Sarah herself. Her petition echoed the allegations involving the teenager, and added further details specific to her own household. That after being confronted about the incident, Duffy threatened suicide and fled. In court language, he went on the run, and that he had access to a firearm. Duffy was ordered to move out of the home he shared with her, and to stay at least 100 yards away from her at all times. That order was extended on June 23rd, and was set to remain active through August. On that same day, June 23rd, Sarah appeared in court again, this time to explain to a judge why she wanted her own protective order to continue. This detail matters. Protective orders in many jurisdictions are not indefinite by default. They often require the person seeking protection to return to court and justify, in person, in front of the individual they are afraid of, why that protection should remain in place. Sara did this. She stood in a courtroom and made her case for her own safety, weeks before her death. The order was extended. It did not save her. A little over 2 weeks after that court appearance, on July 11, 2026, Sara Gilson recorded a TikTok video. The trend she was participating in was by that point extremely widespread. Users would film themselves walking toward an empty chair, sitting down, and addressing the camera as though a documentary crew were capturing an interview about their life. Often for comedic effect, often exaggerating mundane personal drama into false, dramatic confessions. Sara's video used the same visual language. She walked to the chair, she sat, she clasped her hands. Witnesses who later reviewed the footage and reporting on the video described her knees visibly shaking as she looked into the camera. She was not describing an exaggerated version of her life for laughs. She was describing the allegations against her husband, a man who weeks earlier, a court had ordered to stay away from her home. There is no publicly confirmed record of Duffy's direct reaction to this specific video. What is confirmed is the timeline that followed it. 12 days after she posted it, both Sara and Sean Duffy were dead. On Thursday, July 23, 2026, Owasso police were dispatched to a residence near the intersection of East 123rd Place North and North 130th East Avenue, responding to a domestic disturbance call. The call did not come from an adult. According to police, a juvenile living in the home made the 911 call. That juvenile was Sara's son. Reporting indicates he first sought help by going to a neighbor's door before the shooting was reported to police. A moment that places a child, in the middle of the night, running from his own home in search of someone who could help his mother. When officers arrived, they found a man and a woman inside the residence, both dead from what police described as apparent gunshot wounds. Investigators determined that Jeremiah Sean Duffy shot and killed Sara Gilson before turning the gun on himself. Police have characterized the deaths as an apparent murder-suicide. A family member who spoke to local station FOX23 said he understood that Duffy broke into the home before the shooting occurred, a detail consistent with the protective order that legally barred him from that property. Sara's son, the child who made the emergency call, was not physically harmed. The protective order that should have kept Sean Duffy 100 yards from that house, the order Sara had gone back to court weeks earlier to defend and extend, was active on the night he came back anyway. Police have stated that his presence there Thursday night violated that order. There are limits to what is confirmed at this stage, and a responsible account of this case has to name them clearly. Owasso police have not released additional public detail about the separate investigation into the allegations involving the 15-year-old basketball player, including whether charges were filed, pending, or under continued review at the time of the shooting. The full forensic and investigative findings from the night of July 23rd have not been completely released. What is confirmed comes from the Owasso Police Department's public statements: apparent gunshot wounds, an apparent murder-suicide, and a domestic violence call that originated from inside the home. This is an active matter. Some of what is described here may be added to, corrected, or clarified as police and court proceedings continue. Nothing in this account should be read as a final legal determination of guilt for any allegation that has not been adjudicated in a court of law. Individuals named in protective order filings are, under the law, entitled to the presumption that civil allegations are not the same as criminal conviction. Though it must also be said plainly that Sara Gilson is no longer alive to see any part of this process reach its conclusion. Her funeral and memorial arrangements have been organized by her family, who have asked, through local reporting, that she be remembered not for the manner of her death, but for the woman described consistently by everyone who knew her. A mother who fought for her children, a stylist who became a genuine source of support to the people who sat in her chair, and, in her family's words, the life of every room she entered. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, help is available 24 hours a day through the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233 or by texting START to 88788. If you believe someone is in immediate danger, contact local emergency services directly. This case remains active. This video will be updated if further confirmed details are released by law enforcement or the courts. Sara Gilson did everything the system tells victims of domestic violence to do. She filed for protection. She returned to court to defend that protection when it was challenged. She spoke publicly about what she feared. And on July 23, 2026, weeks after a judge ordered Sean Duffy to stay 100 yards from her home, he came back anyway. Her son made the call that brought police to that house. He was not physically harmed. He will carry what he witnessed for the rest of his life. Sara leaves behind 2 teenage children, a family still processing a loss that arrived without warning, and a community of clients and friends who describe her the same way, again and again, as someone who made people laugh until they cried, who fought for her kids without hesitation, and who gave more to the people around her than her job ever required. A vigil has been held in her memory in Collinsville, where friends and family gathered to remember her not for how she died, but for how she lived. The separate investigation into the allegations that first prompted Sara to seek protection, allegations involving a minor, remains, as of this recording, unresolved in public record. If Owasso police or Oklahoma courts release further findings, this will no longer be the final word on this case. What is certain is this: a protective order is a legal document. It could not stop a man who had already decided to violate it. Sara Gilson's death is a reminder that the systems built to protect victims of domestic violence often depend on enforcement that arrives after the fact, and that for too many people, the paperwork runs out before the danger does. Again, if you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, help is available 24 hours a day through the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233 or by texting START to 88788. Sara Gilson was 43 years old. Subscribe to Behind the Case File for more real crime investigations covered with accuracy and respect.